Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack. Hello, welcome back into another episode of the Get Invested podcast with Matthias and Jordan. As always, we're very excited to be here today and talk real estate and finances, and as always, some mild shenanigans, probably, hopefully, just to keep you guys from falling asleep, especially if you're driving. We don't want you falling asleep while driving. So we're excited today as well because we have a guest, and I'm sure you guys are also excited to have another voice other than mine and Matthias's. We understand that. So today we have Caleb Drake, who is first and foremost, was a colleague of Matthias's, and he's now in the real estate space himself. And I think we just recently sent out a newsletter about some of the stuff we're getting into. So we're here to talk about that and expand upon it. So to get us started here, Matthias, why don't you just say, how you and Caleb knew each other, and and then get Caleb's take on that as well. And
yeah,
go from there.
Yeah, so Caleb and I go way back, actually. Military. He flew a airplane that deployed a lot to the same places that we deployed to in the airplane I flew. But I met him when I was in the plan shop, and he was a squadron planner back then. And so I took him on a couple of exercises. I would take squadron planners from the individual airplanes, and I would kind of group them all together. We'd go to an exercise or something. And Caleb was a pretty squared away dude, so I pulled the strings that were available to me and brought him up to the shop, to the wing shop from his squadron, and kind of recruited him up there. Told him it was the best job on base, and I don't think he would argue with me after coming up and spending several years up there too, just like I did. So that was cool. Got a lot of fun times working together. Did a lot of heavy lifting, I'd say. There were some exercises that we pulled off that I don't know how still to this day, but good times back in the Air Force days. But then we would spend a lot of time sitting up in the shop in the vault talking real estate too, because he's always been interested in it, at least as long as I've known him. And by that time, we were well on our way, multifamily syndication, stuff like that. So he'd pick my brain, and I'd hear whatever he was working on, short terms or flipping or whatever. But Caleb, tell us a little bit about what got you to this point here.
Yeah, so I actually started in real estate because of the deployments. So I started renting out my personal house as an Airbnb while I was deployed, and then came back from a deployment. And my son's mom, my ex-wife, actually was deploying right after me. She was a contractor. And so I rented her house out for the summer, and we stayed there, and I rented my house out for that whole summer as an Airbnb. Took that money, bought another one, took that money, bought another one, took that money, bought some multifamily, small multifamily, like fourplex, triplex style, 1031, a couple of those into some other stuff. And now setting it it depends on the 16 single families, and then one of those is a triplex that we have, and we've got some land we're going to develop over there. But I started realizing that single families have, every single family has a roof, every single family has a sewer line, and sewer lines in old houses love to collapse, and every one of them has a HVAC. So it's economy of scale. It made sense to start really talking about multifamily stuff, and that's kind of where we've collided here on this path with Jordan as well.
That's a lot of individual properties. Are they close to one another? Are they all over the panhandle? Where are they?
No, so the majority are in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is my hometown. It's a great rental market. As far, my alma mater. So I went there. Nice. I actually started investing in Indiana when I did 6 years active duty as an enlisted guy, and I went back to college on an Air Force scholarship. But we'd been stationed overseas, so we decided to go back to our hometown, my hometown, and we had a ton of babysitters, a ton of stuff because my son was about 3 years old. And so I went to school full time at Indiana State, and honestly, for the first 2 months, we couldn't find a rental that was worth that I would put my family in. And I was like, you know what, I can change that. And so once I graduated and I got through flight training and everything, and I had a little bit of money, I started doing some flips and doing some rentals up there to try to create a better quality product. And that was really what my passion was. Single families don't make a ton per door, especially with the current interest rates, but like it was good to be able to put people into a home that like I would live in. And then, obviously making money is important. So, on top of that, so that's kind of where we looked at like scaling that into a larger projects and, try to buy bigger multifamily projects to do the same thing.
So they're all in Indiana.
So the majority of the single families and then the triplex are in Indiana. The short-term rentals are Pensacola and Navarre. We've got one there. We've got a cabin up on Smith Lake that we're actually in the process that we were going to flip into a Airbnb, so like a Burr STR for all the people using the the cliche names and stuff. Kind of had not a falling out with that business partner, but he got really busy. He's going back to do his prestigious PhD program through the Air Force and just doesn't have time. And I'm not going to do all of it. So we're just going to flip that property right now. We've sold 3 of the lots that we separated on that. And then now we're selling the cabin. And once we do that, then I'll probably dump that into another short-term rental because I own a short-term rental management company as well. So that's kind of a reason that we still invest in short terms.
Serial
yeah,
entrepreneur.
I gotta tell you, I thought you just like had messed up on your LinkedIn when I looked at it, like when you connected back whenever, because you had like 4 different current jobs. I was like, did he just not in one of these when he added the other one? Like, did you just forget to like change the date because they were all like active? And I was like, no, what in the world is happening here? But turns out, no, you're just all of those. You just have all of those.
Yeah, so we buy and hold single families, and then we flip some single families in both Indiana and Florida. And then we own a short-term rental management company that we have about 26 units under management right now, from Gulf Shores all the way to Panama City Beach. And then a couple that I have a business partner in that company that we do everything together. They have a couple properties in like Blue Ridge as well. And so we manage a little bit up in that area, but predominantly we're the Florida coast, and the Alabama coast.
So these short-term rentals, as in people rent them to come down and go to the beach for a week, that kind of thing. Okay, good to know. I have a connection. I'm sure I'll get a great rate if I need to come down.
Of course you will.
If I don't want to stay with Matthias, but well, that's really cool. I mean, that's a lot going on. Now, I'm assuming somebody is up there in Indiana doing stuff, or do you have just like a Cessna? You're just flying into Terre Haute on a regular basis, like.
Well, it's a Citation, whatever G5, but it's.
Oh wow! No. If you had a G5, I don't think you'd be here talking to us.
So I built a team up there. I've got a contractor up there, a realtor up there, property manager, and we've kind of got a pretty good system with our off market. So we do a lot of off market acquisition, mailers, direct mail. We were doing some cold calling, but right now direct mail kind of works in that market. And so probably bringing in, 10 leads a month, maybe buying one, maybe wholesaling one, something like that. And then, but we've got a contractor up there that's doing the walkthroughs. We've got a system in place for that. We've got a team of virtual assistants that help in a lot of this stuff. But we've set up a good checklist and a good process to be able to kind of manage all of that from Florida. So I probably get up there once a quarter, maybe. And a lot of it's kind of revolved around the holidays, just like using the business up there as an excuse to go home and see family and such.
I'm sure your family will be, that warms the cockles of their heart that, the business is a reason for you to see them.
Well, and we know that his family's avid listeners of this podcast. So
yeah,
now they know secrets out.
Exactly. Our national audience, of course, includes Indiana. Well, I think, Matthias, unless you want to go somewhere else with this, I was just going to say maybe now that we should just talk about Indiana as a market, since that's something that, is on the forefront of all of our brains. I want to, not retail, but not single, but
I want to get into later. We can do Indiana now, but I do want to hear more about systematizing, because as you grow and scale and remain in the Air Force, it's tough to juggle all the tasks. So I do want to get back into that after we talk Indiana. But yeah, let's talk about Indiana. You're one of the driving factors in kind of my company, Capital Velocity Investments, looking at Indiana as an expansion market. One, to get away from the coast and the coastal insurance issues, and just to diversify a little bit. But two, the numbers are hard to ignore up there. And I think you've got a couple numbers that you can share with us here. But basically, the Midwest markets are not flyover anymore. People, mid-sized cities in the Midwest are really, really kicking butt and growing, and they're really desirable places to live now. You don't have to go live in LA or New York to have a good solid job and career, and to get some of the amenities and things and entertainment stuff that you can get now in kind of a up and coming Midwestern city now. So yeah, tell us a little bit about Indiana and why what you've told me and what we've learned that is bringing us up there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I started investing in Indiana because I had connections up there, and I knew the market, and it was easy. So that was, my driving force originally. But then when I really started digging into it to see if I wanted to scale up there, it really made sense because, like, for instance, in Pensacola, Florida, our average rents are around like $1,700 a month, but your insurance, could be $4,000 a year, depending on, on a single family. One of our
That'd
short-term
be
rentals,
nice.
yeah, right.
4,000 would be amazing.
Our short-term rental it's like near downtown. It's like 4,200 a year, and it's a small 1,200 square foot house. Where my insurance on single families in Indiana are $600 to $750 a year. I'm paying $53 a month on some of them, and I was upset about that, and it increased. So like those, the numbers are exponentially different, right? But the rents in Indiana, the average rental price is still like $1,349, $1,350. If you just want to average round up, like $1,350 a month. So you can buy a house for sub $100,000 and still get the 1%, 1.5%, sometimes 2% rule if you do a value add, kind of like a Burr style an investment strategy up there. And so we were able to, accumulate a lot of properties with, it doesn't look sexy on paper when you're like, my total assets under management is $1.5 million or whatever, but it's like, yeah, I still have 17 properties that are worth $60,000 each, renting for $1,000 a month. And taxes up there. So investors on single family pay 2% of assessed value off the 2% of the assessed value, and that's adjusted like a max of like 4% each year. So you're able to kind of already know what you're looking at. And then something that we had just recently found out talking to some brokers in Indianapolis is Marion County has a really good incentive with multifamily taxes that that I think Matthias could probably talk about a little bit more, but they cap your taxes on your property taxes to incentivize, the value add opportunities in Marion County, which is the Indianapolis metro market. So we're seeing a lot of incentives as far as tax purposes for investors. And then insurance is just insanely cheaper relative to what we're seeing right now in the coastal markets that is just destroying cash flow.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Basically, that's what you look at the Midwest. You look at the Kansas Cities, the Indianapolises, and some of the smaller but still hopping towns across the Midwest, and it's all cash flow. It's like the basis you can get these properties at, compared to what we pay down in the coastal markets is sometimes a small fraction of the price, and you're still getting such steady cash flow. So your basis is low. Whatever you had to invest to acquire the property is really low, and then you just get relatively high rents. And especially if you're providing that good quality place to live and in a good location in the path of progress, because all these cities are growing rapidly. Population growth and the job growth is significant in those areas that match some of the coastal markets. It's what make the coastal market so attractive, is that everybody wants to live there and everybody wants to work there. But you deal with the cost of living on the coast, but you get the same growth rates, the same long-term growth potential in the Midwest without all that extra cost of living stuff. That's why we just can't ignore those markets anymore.
Yeah, and you're starting to see a kind of a migration back in some of those areas with employers, requiring people to come back into the office a few days a week, et cetera. And obviously Florida still has a net positive, but as a realtor, I'm also surprised we're not a real estate team of 6 agents as well.
Oh no,
So
like I said, I've been on your LinkedIn. Yeah. You're apparently you have I think you have multiple personality disorder. That's just all you don't realize. You never get tired because you never realize which one's working when. It just refreshes, because it's just crazy how much you do, man. It's impressive.
Yeah, my psychologist says it's that my severe unmedicated ADHD that the military won't let me medicate. So I was saying yes a lot more than I do these days, but now that I've stopped saying yes and kind of hyper focused on what I know is going to progress my net worth and everything for my family. It
Yeah.
was like, if I thought I could make $1, I would do it. Now it's like, I had to like kind of
Yeah.
dive into very specific things. But
That's why he's
I just
taking
talked,
up candle making.
yeah, yeah, $6 a candle. So no,
Yeah.
but when I
No,
was,
like, I mean, it's crazy what they get for those things. Yeah. There you go. That's your new business right there. And you can put your candles in your properties. And when you have open houses, then you can sell the
That's right.
candles. I
yeah,
mean,
give them
this
away
is
to my
horizontal
relatives and everything.
integration. I'm just handing these ideas out for free, Caleb. Free.
But
But well, go ahead. You were talking about being also a realtor.
no, yeah. So I was looking at a few houses recently and talking to people like, "Why are you moving?" And they're like, "Well, cost of living increased in Florida, and we just want to move back to the Midwest. We like the simple life." And I'm like, I've never expected like I'm not moving back to the Midwest.
No, me neither.
Like you would have to say, hey, we will like triple your income a year and you won't pay any taxes on it for me to willingly move back. And I still might move back alone because I don't know if my wife would ever move to the Midwest. But there's a ton of, like, honestly, like the small town feel, in some of the cities that are kind of growing, you're seeing a lot of migration to those cities because of tax incentives, cost of living is lower. Besides the snow, like you still have a good quality of life that has increased, over the years. I'm surprised when I go back to see, like, we got a lot of artisan coffee shops and things like that moving in, and kind of gentrification in some of the neighborhoods, even in Terre Haute, which is not known to be a nice area. Like, I could say that I'm a Hoshian, but like, it's not, nobody's like, oh my God, I can't wait to go to Terre Haute, Indiana. But, they've done a lot recently to try to increase certain areas in town. And that's why we're trying to like buy in those areas and fix up and flip to kind of, continue that path of progress out east and west from those areas.
Well, I mean, I think that, I don't know if this is one of those things where does the market drive social or does social drive the market? Because, I mean, one of the things is, yeah, there's still a lot of people who grow up and want to move to the big city or whatever, right? But that like narrative of like, that's, I'm going to grow up and get out of here and, go to see the lights or whatever. That's
make something of myself.
Where everything's interconnected. And, I was recently, I was teaching an article back a couple years ago, I guess now, but they were pointing out all these major businesses. They're like, I can move my company to, this was like some random place in Tennessee because it's going to have every single thing that this place in California has. I mean, except maybe the coast, but like these people aren't living on the coast, right? Like they're not multi millionaires, right? Like it's like
Malibu.
We can move here and it has all of the same things, right? I mean, it's not like all of a sudden you're missing massive amounts of things. Now maybe, if you're a big, like you love the theater or something, maybe that's not going to, gonna be a little bit further away, but
here in New York.
Yeah. Other than that, well, I mean, even, I have family lives outside of Cleveland. Cleveland has a heralded theater repertory company. It's great. They get all kinds of great stuff. Charlotte, same thing. I didn't see Lin-Manuel went to play Hamilton, but I saw really, really good people, so I mean, that idea of like you have to go live in like one of three places, it's just over, especially with interconnectivity and virtual and remote learning. I mean, in North Carolina, they were building places that quite a ways from cities and people were moving there because they didn't need to drive into the office anymore. And they're like, no, I can go out here and have everything that I want and everything that I need. And, so it's kind of an interesting, the cities are growing, but that's because people don't necessarily they don't need to be in the city. You can do everything near it, right? And I feel like you guys are bagging on the Midwest pretty hardcore. I mean, that was going to be my job. Just, I've heard good things about Indianapolis for a long time. I've heard Indianapolis is super cool. Kansas City's got its things too.
I think
it is real
Indy's
cool.
poised to grow this year. Cost of single family homes up there is supposed to increase 5 to 7%. And in this market, that's kind of a crazy number. I think the only reason I being from the Midwest, that's the only reason. Like it's kind of like, hey man, like I can talk about my family, but you can't talk about my family.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean? It's one of those things. Like every time I go up there, I'm up to sometimes to Louisville. We really like Louisville. We really like Indianapolis. Some of the kind of smaller Fort Wayne's, like they're cool cities and they're just increasing And, okay, cool. We've had fancy coffee shops down here on the coast for years, right? And now they've got them up there. Like there's a kombucha shop in the little area where we're flipping, like in Terre Haute, Indiana. Things are starting to move that way. And I think that
My
people
parents drink kombucha. So, I mean, it is clearly mainstream at this point. Like my 75-year-old Southern parents like kombucha.
They tried to get,
they
gave some
on me.
they gave us some when Jen and I visited with the boys while we were up there. They
I'm like, did you guys buy a
pushed
company?
it on
Like,
us.
what is happening?
You got stock? You got kombucha stock?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because all those things have, I guess it's just everybody wants them so that they're viable lots of different places. I mean, I'm not going to move somewhere because it has a kombucha place, but just that ilk of everywhere it has all kinds of different cool things now. Like you can find a thing that you like. Whereas,
but if
I guess it used to be just, that cliche. I don't feel like that stereotypes. I guess it's still true some places where like you go to a town and it just doesn't have anything. But
yeah, but I mean, it's a lot easier to move businesses and things like you said out to these places, and you're not losing quality of living for your employees and then as the big companies do that, the little companies follow. The coffee shops and whatever, the restaurants,
sure,
cool hip breweries, microbreweries, whatever, that make a cool neighborhood or a desirable neighborhood of people, especially young people, want to live, do families, be there long term. I think that's the Midwest has kind of figured that out.
Yeah, I guess one of the things from my perspective is that I think this has been happening for a lot longer in North Carolina and upstate South Carolina than maybe other places. And so maybe that's why I'm thinking like, oh yeah, of course, because Asheville, Charlotte, upstate Greenville, South Carolina, all those places have been places where big companies have moved. Borg Warner, Timken, BMW, like all of those things have done that move. And now Greenville's, I don't like to say anything nice about South Carolina outside of Charleston, but Greenville is actually pretty cool. It's like shockingly cool. Like it really is. And it's that same thing, right? There's stuff there. There's jobs. So now everything else is meeting them. Well, I mean, the thing about, I guess, these path of progress places though, I was wondering about is what is it? It can be, the inventory of multifamily can be spotty or intermittent and stuff. So I mean, I guess that would be the focus now, is kind of like what are we seeing in that regard around these? I guess we're talking, when you say Indiana, we really mean just the greater Indianapolis metro area, right? That part of Indiana. I mean, we're not talking all the way up to the tippy top.
No, we are.
We are. Oh, okay.
Up, yeah. I mean, we're not talking Gary, Indiana.
No,
we underwrote that and we were like, it's too close to Chicago. But I've got a client and a mentor that has flipped 2,000 houses up there and is very bullish on Gary, Indiana. And the numbers, like besides the crime rates, the numbers didn't look that bad. But I mean, Fort Wayne, Indiana is it's like the third largest city in Indiana, and it's right up north. Evansville is in the southwest corner, like at the Kentucky border. That's a very good market that we're underwriting. And then some of the tertiary markets of Indianapolis, even though Marion County has a lot of really good tax incentives for investors, the city limits is something that just me knowing enough about Indianapolis, I kind of wanted to stay out of until if the right property came in, then we might fly up there, right, to like really see if it's where it needs to be. But there's some really growing pockets of Indianapolis, and then there's some areas that I just would want to stay away from just because of crime and tenant quality. But when you start looking at tertiary markets like Noblesville, Indiana, Plainfield, even all the way out to like Brownsburg, some of those smaller markets where people are commuting into downtown Indianapolis or the outskirts for their work, those are really good markets. You've got a few college markets that we've looked at, but that's a very niche type of client that you really kind of have to know how, and, investing in a college town like I do, I think there's potential there, but it's something that like we've explored, Matthias and I have kind of looked at, but it would definitely have to be the right property when it comes to that. And, Bloomington, Indiana kind of specifically comes to mind when we're talking about that. And Bloomington there's a lot of incentives right now that the county or the city of Bloomington is trying to entice people to stay because, it's like a 90% migration out of Bloomington when Indiana University students finish college and they're like, hey, you love the city, let's create business here for them to stay. And so there's a lot of incentives there for businesses to come in, especially, some of IU's not really like a tech school, it's not an engineering school, but there is, still opportunity there to bring in students to stay there and increase the population size of the city. And so I think that if they start actually implementing some of the stuff that they've been talking about and they start bringing in some of that business, there's going to be a void there because everything is student housing there. So, newly graduated students aren't students.
Right. I mean, that's they come back every year. So that's its own economy. But what about you leaving out West Lafayette? Let's not leave out the Boilermakers. How's it look up there?
We haven't really looked too much at it.
I don't think we have. I don't think we've underwritten that one too much. I don't even know how big that city is.
Not big.
I grew up in Indiana, like an IU, fan, so like we didn't really even want to talk about Purdue. It's like,
that's just a bias. That's a Caleb bias.
Of course.
Expanding on that though, that's a goofy point, but it makes a good point in that that's part of why we're so bullish on Indiana is because of the knowledge, the experience, and the background that Caleb can bring in a partnership. Is that I know infinitely more about all these cities that we just talked about because Caleb has been there and has been hearing the reputation of these places for decades and knows, that kind of expertise and market expertise is pretty invaluable. I mean, I would rely on property manager to tell me that, but theirs is often a lot more hyper focused on whatever city they're operating in. Not as a whole across the state or something like what Caleb brings. So that's part of why we're so confident that we're going to be able to find something here pretty quick. It's just that, and he can talk the talk with, like, we've been on multiple calls with with broker teams, like the who's who of broker teams in Indiana, multifamily. We've already been on calls with him, and Caleb can talk the talk, and he's just like, we like this about this little market or this little neighborhood or whatever, and this thing knowledge that it's just going to take me a long time to pick up. Until I get, really wrapped around a specific market, I'm just not going to know it to the level that he does. So it gives us a lot of confidence when we go and we talk to bro. You'd be surprised, dude. They do millions and millions of dollars of transactions, like across like 4 teams. It's pretty crazy. They take it all down.
I believe you. I was just laughing because you said who's who, and I just heard who's Hoosier. It was just
who's Hoosier. Gotcha. I could have done turbo
like the who's Hoosier of business
of Indiana multifamily.
So when you say talk to talk, I'm assuming this isn't just like Hoosier talk. This is just he knows the area, not like you have to switch to some kind of Indiana jargon.
Well, you got to wave at everybody, and
there's certain things you do have to do. I mean that's. I just lost my point because I just was laughing at the joke. I completely forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, well,
exactly. I do think so, Matthias, you make a good point in like just when it comes to partnerships, like playing on each other's strengths, right? Like we started looking at property and we saw one up there and we're kind of looking at it and we're like, oh wow, it was pretty much a Class A property, and we're like, but it was over $100,000 a door, and it's like we can buy that and in some of these Sunbelt markets, right? At that price. So like we need to find the properties up there that make sense on the value add, understanding that the $65,000, $75,000 a door is probably going to be a much better purchase, right? Where I'm looking at it and I'm like, this could be an easy property to take down just because of, there's not a ton of CapEx and stuff. But where when we start talking about, because we knew the area, we knew the market, we knew Evansville was going to be a great spot for it. Everything around it made sense. But then we just started looking at the numbers and these are Florida numbers, right? Like we're not moving to Indiana for Florida numbers. And it made sense, because you aren't going to have necessarily, you're probably not going to have the real fast appreciation up there, that you're seeing that you can kind of force into a lot of the properties in the Sun Belt that are seeing that huge net migration. But you do see a very steady, straight line appreciation up there. And you do see like a steady rent increase. And there's not a ton of pullback when it comes to that because everybody pretty much, that there's people moving in, but like the population is fairly steady across the board with, an increase every year in the markets that we're looking at.
Yeah, and it's less. The rates might be the same, but they don't have the same numbers as the Florida. So whereas it might be a 10% growth over the next 5 years, which is great numbers, but that might be a 20,000 increase versus a 450,000 person increase. You know what I mean? It's all scale dependent, but yeah, that's exactly right. I'm able to bring the multifamily experience and the underwriting experience, and also the kind of know what it's going to take in a deal to get the return numbers that our investors kind of expect from us. That takes a value add of some sort, up to a certain scale, in order to get the kind of the velocity of capital that we have, capital velocity, that we want. That's how you build wealth, is that you keep that money working for you as fast as possible with as big a chunks as equity as possible. And it's more difficult in a straight line growth state, like a Midwestern state. That does not mean it is impossible. And I feel like the expertise that we all kind of bring to the table is going to allow us to kind of capture some of that value in those markets.
So is the growth, population growth, is this people migrating from in-state to these areas? Kind of like, I mean, that's what, in Mississippi, it's basically everybody in Mississippi is moving to like 3 places. Is that what's happening in Indiana, or is these people coming over from like Illinois and Ohio and stuff, or is it just mainly where Indianians, what do you guys call yourselves, are moving to? Okay, right, yeah, of course, are moving to? Which one is it, or is it both?
It's a mix. You're seeing,
okay.
You're definitely seeing people moving from out of state into like Indianapolis and a lot of the metros, or some of the smaller metros. Chicago's moving, east over into some of the Indiana markets, 1, to avoid taxes, and 2, to get a little bit more for their, bang for their buck. And you're seeing Fort Wayne bring in a lot of, incentives for businesses. And so people are, almost forced to move there in a way with their company. But I think some of them are happily moving that way. And then you're seeing some of these smaller areas of people moving into some of these markets as well. And like I said, at a micro level, just from like personal experience, I've just been talking to people moving from Northwest Florida back to the Midwest, just to go back to the simple life that they were used to. And, some of their family are still there. They expected their kids to move out of state, and they decided to stay. And so a lot of the older, families are moving back, kind of thing is what I've been seeing recently. But that's, again, a micro level. I don't have the macro trends to speak right now on this call.
Right. I mean, I guess I just asked because, North Carolina, I don't know a lot of people realize this, but it's like the 10th most populous state. Like it's got a lot of people, but a lot of that is just basically like a pipeline of like the Northeast. It's all like New York, Boston, like all because we bought tech in, we have the biotech and the banking and all that. So it's just like a lot of like
research
some people from the South moving up, but it's a lot of just Northeast down. And honestly, a shocking number of people from Ohio. Which means I have to see way more Ohio State flags than I want to. But yeah, it's just interesting, like where the influx comes from, because I'm wondering if there's going to start being like a western rather than a southern, migration, because there's been the southern migration, I feel like, for quite some time. By the way, they've started referring to us as part of the Sun Belt too, and this is confusing me, and I don't like it. Have you guys noticed this? Like now North Carolina is a Sun Belt state. I'm like, what? I
think it's they blended Sun Belt and Southeast, and now because technically Carolina is part of the Southeast, now you get to be part of the Sun Belt too.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than being part of the Bible Belt, I guess, but I mean, still, it's like
or the Rust Belt.
Or the exactly. But I'm like, why did we just get suddenly lumped in with like Arizona?
Yeah,
these are not the same. But so it's just, I don't know. I'm fascinated by that demographic shift. So I would be fascinated to dig in myself about like just where is there starting to be that attraction from overpopulated areas, and as things sort themselves out. The only time I've ever been in Indiana, I have to tell you, Caleb, is when we were actually in Louisville for a debate tournament. And well, I don't want to go into why we ended up getting a hotel very late. It was the district's problem, and we ended up having to stay across the river in
were you in Jeffersonville or Clarksville or
Clarksville? Clarksville.
because Jeffersonville is a market that we've actually underwritten, which is a very good market. And the reason is because people don't want to live in downtown Louisville. They can drive 15, 20 minutes, be across the state line in a little safer area.
Yeah, it was Clarksville. Look, when I was there, I wasn't looking at it from a multifamily lens. I was looking at it, I had 30 high schoolers that had to get places, and also they have a tendency, as teenagers do, to wander off, and I was not loving it. I was not loving it for that reason, especially also because there was the toll bridge across the river, so we had to drive this circuitous route to not play the toll every time. But you know what? Even Clarksville had a cool coffee shop. I had a cool independent coffee shop that I went to multiple times to get away from the teenagers. Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's my Indiana story.
I wanna spend the last few minutes, if possible. I wanna dig back into what we were talking a little bit about earlier. I am throwing my weight around here.
Bogarting my job here.
I want to hear more about how you kind of manage your time, and how you leverage your VA, your virtual assistants, and the team systems, whatever, to accomplish and stay afloat of all the different tasks you got going on.
Yeah. So like I said, we run a short-term rental management company down here. We have 7 virtual assistants in that company, everything from maintenance coordination to guest check-in, guest communication. They run 60 to 80% probably about 80% of the company now. We just hired a new virtual assistant manager to manage the VAs. And so we use Filipino-based VAs. A lot of conversation. You could do a whole podcast on conversation of geographically based virtual assistants and what each kind of culture brings to, as we would say, brings to the fight. But I have an executive assistant that kind of manages my day to day and does a lot of the stuff. She works 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I get a few hours at the end of the day to kind of catch up. But, the night before, I'll send out kind of what the next day's kind of priorities are. And then as things come up during the day when I'm, fly fighting winning for the Air Force, I'll just blast out, tasks to her. And I'm able to probably get about 75 to 80% of my admin tasks done daily by her. So I'm not really checking my own email. I'm responding to our realtor stuff that I need to, but she handles, I have a listing checklist, and we've created a flow chart. Anytime we get a new listing for the team, that goes through that chart, and she does every one of those steps. And then if you've ever heard of the 10-80-10, the 10-80-10 rule. So in a task, when you have a team or a virtual assistant, you should do the first 10%, setting the goal, setting the expectations, and then the team does the 80%, and then you do the last 10%. So that last 10% is quality check. For me, it's checking the listing, it's going live on the listing. It's, emailing the final email to the owner, letting them know we're live, putting the sign in the yard. That's my 10%. Everything else is done for me in that with the checklist and the team that we've created. And that takes time, right? So building that out is not easy, but I leverage a ton of artificial intelligence within my business. A lot of automation with Zapier. If you've ever heard of Zapier, it integrates. So if you guys, I know you guys use High Level. So if you're using High Level, you can integrate with Zapier, which will integrate different software debts, right? So we use Airtable for one of our project management softwares, but I can create automations that link every time I put a task in Airtable. For instance, we have a wholesale company. If we get a new lead in a wholesale company, John puts that into Go High Level, but it sends a notification to the Google Drive. The Google Drive creates a script, and it creates all new folders for that deal so that our VA can go in, drop the comps, everything, while he's even on a phone call. And he can be on the phone call, negotiating a contract, and she can be dropping in all of the information for him. And he's on his phone looking at the Google Drive, house down the road sold for, $32,000 or whatever. And all of that it can be done right there with automation and different integrations. And so I use that a lot when it comes to it. My onboarding process for a new Airbnb I created is almost 90% automated now. And we have 4 clicks that we have to do. The client actually fills the contract out for themselves. They don't even realize it, but they have to put their information in. And when they do, I have an automation that's a Zapier automation through PandaDoc. It creates the Airtable data, goes to PandaDoc and creates the contract for them, and then they sign it. So it's a lot of just creating the expectation within as you like with the clients of, hey, this is kind of how we're doing, like this is how it's going to happen. And then pretty much all the automations and the VAs run everything. But tons of training. I mean, you've got to train your team. You have to rely on them. And I thought I could train them once and then just let it run. And then no, you've got to you've got to do a ton of follow up. And I mean, it's just like anything, right? You're not training a new aircrew guy and saying, go fly an airplane. Like you're doing check rides, you're doing different.
Yeah, that's interesting. And go ahead.
I just want to make sure when you say virtual assistant, you mean, just for people to be clear on what that means, you're talking about a person who is just remote and is doing this because of
we call them remote
technology.
team members. Technically, we call them remote team members.
Who's like, is this a robot? Like, or what is this virtual assistant? Like, no, you're just talking. Yeah, you're leveraging telecommunication
connected
ability.
via.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. And but the point, for aircrew, one of the most important things in flying an aircraft is the checklist, right? Is knowing the checklist. So, and the checklist is developed from, things going wrong, people forgetting stuff, finding out which is very important to do at, very specific times. That's the same as, that checklist that you're building for, for your VA to run or your team to run is like, it's only as good as that checklist. So that's why systems are so important. And you build the knowledge of it. Knowing how to do something isn't good enough. You need to be able to capture that. And obviously you're never going to come up with a perfect checklist that thinks of everything, but so you just continuously adapt as you go. But that's something that I need to work on in my business, because I find I feel like I know how to do everything that I do, but I don't know how to train somebody in a reasonable amount of time to do it in order to be able to take it off my plate. And I need to get better at creating that checklist, because it, like, intuitively I can go sit down and do it, but I'd have to sit there and tell everybody, and I don't have a good structure of how to tell somebody how to do it. That's something that is on my personal list of things to work on this year, because I'm I don't have 7 different businesses, but, well, I guess technically I do, but I'm
technically every single one of them is it.
Exactly. Maybe I do, but the point is that I don't have the team leveraged out that you do, and I need to get that way, because the biggest value in my day is not me recording expenses in QuickBooks for my 8-unit apartment complex. That is not the best use of my time. It is what I have to do now, because I don't have I haven't hired that out yet. But those are the kind of things that I personally want to get better on, and you're infinitely better at it than I am at this point.
Yeah. Well, and one of the fun things about building a business ground up like we're doing right now is you have to create the thing and then realize it's wrong and then do it again, and then
100%.
Yeah, you're building a checklist that you have to then checklist, and it may not be correct when you checklist it. So like you're just
there's like about 3 major steps to like creating a virtual team or a remote team. One, like a time analysis for you, like you just said, like you're spending time doing things. Write down every time you do something, one that you hate or one that somebody could do better. Just write it down, and then you can create a job profile for that. I hire off of online jobs. And we created our own hiring process. The way that we do it is we send out a job description and just like create the essentially like the job description on online jobs PH, and then you'll get replies, right? But in my job description, I put an Easter egg in there. I say when you reply with like a keyword, right? Like ours was guest first. So the subject line has to be guest first. You'll get 200 replies back. 60 of them will say guest first. Then we send them an automated email after that. My VA sends it out to everybody, and it says, hey, thanks, you've been selected for round 2. Fill out this personality test. We don't hire off of qualification as much as we hire off of personality, because I can train you on something, but I can't change your personality. I can't change the way that you operate on the day-to-day, and I can't change the way that you operate under stress. So there's the two things right there, right? Almost kind of like a special operations selection process, but like not, because these are just people sitting on a computer with a headset on. But in the same mindset, like I can't take you and mold you into something that you're not, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing it. Like, it's like why half the marriages end, right? So it's like when you look at it, like taking that, and then so now we know our profile that we need for that job. Now we have, out of those 60 people, maybe we say we have 20 that are that profile, that disc profile. If we need a marketing person, they're going to be an I, probably an ID, IC, something like that, right? If you're familiar with the disc profile. So then I take that and then I put them through a group hiring process and then individual hiring process. And so we go through that whole process. But I say it like this is this long thing. The only thing I am on is 20 minutes of the group hiring video. Like my VA goes in and she tells them the job description. She says, hey, the owner's going to be here in 10 minutes. If you guys want to stay for the interview, that's cool. If you don't leave, anybody leaves, that's fine. We don't have to talk to them. Then we go through a group interview and I say, hey, you email me when you want to get on my calendar for an interview. We're going to hire next week. 5 of them don't email me because they didn't listen. That's 5 more people I don't want to hire. Now I got a group of 5 people, maybe 7 people that I go through interviews for at 30 minutes apiece. So I spent 6 hours total in a hiring process to hire 3 to 4 people. And that's how I'm able to kind of leverage my time. And then we have a hiring process or a training process for those people within our short-term rental company.
Onboarding.
Yep.
One of my least favorite phrases, onboarding.
It's horrible. But once you do it once, and honestly, when you do it, like for you and for anybody that's listening to this that's actually interested in this, like create a video of you doing the task, like a Loom video. Hey, this is how I do it. There's also I think it's Scribe How To, that as you do it, AI will create a checklist on how you, like when you click, it'll take a screenshot of what you click and it'll write it in a checklist for you. And so you can just do that. You could create the whole job, the whole training plan, before you even hire someone, and send them, like our VA manager, we created a hiring plan like this. We actually had our remote team do Loom videos of all of their jobs. She went through, reviewed all of those, learned what they did, learned what they were doing wrong because they're telling you how they're doing it. And then she would compare it with our operating procedures and be like, no, this needs fixed, this needs fixed. It's like, cool, there's your job, go fix it. All right. That's why you're getting paid the $100 a week that we pay you to get this done.
Well, it's one of the best jobs in their neighborhood, though.
I pay my
Philippines.
Yeah.
People,
I pay my executive assistant $8 an hour, and that is engineering pay for her in the Philippines. So, we have one lady on our team that's she's a biochemist. She has a master's degree in biochemistry and makes more as a remote assistant than she would in that field in the Philippines. So it's like they're happy. They love our company. We've hired 3 people within 3 out of the 7 that we've hired were referrals from people that already worked for us because they're like, you guys are great to work for. Like, we want our friends here. And luckily they all were exact profile matches. Like, I don't know if they were just trolling us or what, but they all worked out. So.
Nice.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You bring up personality test, and I just have my flashback to my Red Lobster disaster. But I've been told on the pod before. I failed one of those one time when I was in college. I did not understand what I was
Red
doing.
Lobster material.
I was not Red Lobster material.
Dude, my wife's a psychologist. Like, she's a school psychologist, and she creates individual education plans, all of that stuff. But when I met her, she gave me a Myers-Briggs to see if we should date. So,
well, hey, shwoo, you passed.
Yeah.
Well, I know that well. I used to teach, and my wife is still a counselor, a school counselor in Charlotte. So yeah, teaching, it takes all personalities. So there's not one profile for that. But were you nervous when you had to take this, or were you just like, well, if we don't match, I guess we just don't match?
Oh, so. Like the story of me meeting my wife, I was actually in Iraq and my buddy was having a wedding and he was getting married and he was like, are you bringing a date? I'm like, Kevin, I'm single in Iraq. What am I going to do, right? Your wedding's 7 days after I get back. Like, I'm not bringing home.
Just bring it up.
Just
work quick. Bring home an Iraqi.
So he introduced me to the maid of honor, which didn't tell her what his intent was. And so I just started talking to her online. She's like, who's this weirdo? And then it kind of worked out, we got along. And so then she was like, well, you know what? Like, if I'm going to try this out, like, take this test. I want to see if we're compatible. And then we were like, according to her psychology stuff, we're completely compatible. And so it's the rest is history. 3 years of dating later, and 2 years of marriage now. So,
and a 8-month-old baby.
Yeah, not that I've not actually ever been on these apps, but it seems like some of the dating apps should integrate.
You would
this
think
kind
that's
of
actually
stuff.
probably
so
maybe they
that
do.
You could just look and say like, I don't know, whatever. I'm not trying to make Hinge money or anything. So, anyway, well, anything else you wanted to pick Caleb's brain about, Matthias? Any Indiana specific questions?
I thought it's been a great conversation. We've learned a lot, I think.
I think so too. I didn't hear about the market of Pawnee, and I was sort of kind of hoping that we would learn a little about Pawnee. But
I heard their Parks and Rec department is pretty great.
Yes, it's excellent.
I don't want to go to Eagleton.
I can't watch that because it just bothers me so much that they're just talking so much smack on Indiana. So I just I just couldn't do it.
I can't watch a lot of shows that have teachers when the teachers are just like complete screw ups. I'm just like, I can't handle this.
Or all of Outer Banks is actually filmed in South Carolina, so that probably drives you nuts too.
I hate that show. It's a Carolina guy that created this show, and I'm like, ugh, I don't.
He did it on purpose.
But anyways, all right. Well, I got some serious runtime on this one, so probably should shut it down if anyone's still listening. Thanks for sticking with us. We want to really appreciate Caleb coming on today, and we appreciate you guys hanging out and listening to us. And as always, restack, share, 5-star, heart, thumbs up, comment, etc. Let us know if you're actually watching, so we know whether or not we need to change our shirts. All kinds of things that we can learn if you want to let us know. Anyways. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. This has been another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
Up in horsey heaven, here's the thing. You trade your legs for angels' wings. And once we've all said goodbye, take a running